after their first album.
Dude, Frailty of Words was awesome. It was great. The screams on that are like so freaking intense. Like,
yeah.
And it's funny too because there's two guys. Like, there's another guy that screams like real high pitched, and he'll just like come in at the end of one of the screams, like all. It's just like insane.
And if you're the guy that comes in like this, then you are ready for episode 11 of Discography Discussion. I am Joe. That is Dan. That is Buddy. What's up, everybody? And by everybody, I mean everybody.
Everybody.
See what I did there?
That's just the one, actually.
That's the only one you need.
Just the one buddy, actually.
And everybody already knows my name. I don't really know who knows who I actually am.
Right? Every time you're driving down the street and, people are having a bad day, they go, hey, watch it, buddy. And you're like, dude,
what did I do?
Yeah, I'm just here. I don't know what you guys are doing.
I'll tell you what we're doing. We're talking about Hopesfall tonight.
Yes, we are. Hopesfall. Oh, man.
I mean, can we actually have a conversation about Hopesfall, or do we just have to listen to the satellite ears and that's the show?
Well, if you guys can keep me from going full fanboy, I think we'll
never go full fanboy.
Yeah. Buddy's going to be here to lay down some hard-earned truth for us that we may or may not have realized was the truth, but now have chosen to accept it anyway as the truth. So we're talking about Hopesfall. Hopesfall is a hardcore band from the early 2000s, and I mean like really early, like 2001. Which was
99.
Well, sure, yeah, 99. Well, wasn't the Frailty? Yeah, okay, yeah, he's right. The Frailty of Words was 1999. Dang it, I thought 2001, but close enough.
I only know that because I did a bunch of research.
Yeah, I don't research anything.
Congratulations on being the guy in the room who's done the most research this episode, Mr. Buddy.
Oh snap!
Yes.
Well,
maybe that the extent of that research is what does the album year say next to the collection in iTunes?
Yeah, you can't. You can't really argue with the Googles.
I mean, you can.
They know all. See, I was just like typing and stuff in and then clicking I'm feeling lucky, and I had all kinds of cool stuff pops up then. But anyway, Hopesfall, 1999, hardcore, pretty much straight hardcore.
I've heard you classify them as space rock.
Yeah, a little bit later on, sure.
Yeah. Frailty of Words, which is the first album, is kind of more, what do I say? Yeah, like it is more that classic hardcore, but it's got more structure than like your typical hardcore.
Yeah, it's kind of techy a little bit.
Yeah,
a lot of different parts, which is actually pretty common with the late 90s, early 2000s metalcore. There was a whole lot of like, okay, we're gonna play this for 15 seconds, and then we're gonna switch to this, and then we're gonna switch to this, and it's kind of just a lot of parts strung together into like 5 or 6 minutes. The songs were fairly long on the Frailty of Words.
I remember like wondering when the album was gonna end, not in a bad way, but like it was usually your hardcore records are pretty quick.
30 minutes or so. Yeah.
When life gives you lemons, you make life take the lemons back. When Skype gives you a bad connection, you start the conversation over again.
No, Shiva, you've already been out.
This is episode 11 of Discography Discussion. Tonight, your hosts will be Dan.
Yep.
Joe. And Buddy.
Hey.
Hey, Buddy's here? Nobody told me Buddy was here.
Well, didn't you get the memo?
Do you guys send out memos?
Like a Kool-Aid man.
You guys want some metal? Oh, yeah!
I've got a big tattoo on my belly that just says metal.
Metal man.
But it's all stretched out because I'm fat. So.
Well, dude, being fat is so metal.
All the best metal bands are fat guys, right?
Totally, dude. Like, what was that band, Feast Eternal? And they were all like 300 plus pounds. Like, And you're, like, I mean, the band fit the name, right?
You can only play riffs as heavy as you actually are.
Right. Well, like Crimson Thorn, they're like the heaviest band ever, right? And they were like heavy dudes.
Yeah.
Interesting fact. The lead singer's name of that band was Luke Reno. So there's something to that, I think.
I wish this had anything to do with the band that we were talking about tonight.
Yeah, it doesn't. So tonight we're actually talking about Hopesfall.
Hopesfall.
The mighty Hopesfall.
The ultimate in space rock amazing?
Space rock, space metal, metal hardcore, whatever you want to call it.
Very spacey.
Yeah, Hopesfall kind of did it all, right? Really. I mean, they started off as more of like your traditional hardcore band. And when I say traditional hardcore band, I mean like Poison the Well and stuff. So, probably not actually old school hardcore, because that would be like what? Like Black Flag and stuff, but like
yeah,
or
have a more punk sound.
Yeah, Rites of Spring, stuff like that. But no, so this is, I mean, when I was introduced to hardcore, this is the kind of stuff that I was introduced to, stuff like Hopesfall and Poison the Well and like Misery Signals and like Beloved and Zeo.
Which had a lot more of a like an emo like tinge to it.
Yeah, kind of like an emo undercurrent there.
So did you discover Hopesfall before or after Zeo?
I discovered Hopesfall a little bit after Zeo, but not long after. Actually, it's weird because I bought the first Hopesfall album, the Frailty of Words. I bought that, back in '99 when it came out. No, I bought that probably like 2002 or something, and I actually got it out of a like a dollar bin at a local CD store. And it was really cool, too, because I couldn't find any information out about that record when it came out. Like, I looked online, or not when it came out, but, like, when I got it, I looked online, and, like, if you go on Hopesfall's, I don't even know if they have a website anymore, but basically anywhere where they have their discography listed, typically it's not there. Like, it never even happened. It was,
like recorded on their own or something like that.
Yeah, it must have been. There was a label that put it out, but I don't remember what they were. It was like DTS Recordings or something. It was very low key, but yeah, and of course they went on to bigger, better things. They did the No Wings to Speak Of EP, which was great, and they did the Satellite Years, and then they kind of did a 180 and went in a totally different direction, which we'll talk about here in a little bit.
We get to their fourth album, A-Types.
Yes.
See, I discovered Hopesfall from the Satellite Years. Very first thing I think I ever heard was the Escape Pod for Intangibles.
Yeah.
And Dan plays that on shuffle in a car one day, and I say, this is pretty cool. And he says, funny thing, the whole record does not sound like this.
Yeah, it sounds totally different.
And from that point on, I did not care. But it was... It's another example of an almost perfect record in my eyes.
Yeah, the Satellite Years is really good to me. So we might have some disagreement on that later, but I mean, Hopesfall kind of had a very lasting impact on hardcore music. In general, I think there were melodic hardcore bands before that. Like Strong Arm was pretty melodic, and there were bands that did the melodic thing, but I feel like Hopesfall really did something a little bit different. I mean, they had the emo vocals. Like, it's not as unfamiliar of a sound than what you would encounter today with bands that kind of mix the emo singing with the screaming. But now it's that stuff's kind of a bad thing. Whereas, when the Frailty of Words came out, that wasn't like a very common thing back in 1999 to hear that. And when I say emo vocals, I mean they don't really sound like what you would consider to be that now. It's a very different type of emo singing. More reminiscent of stuff like like not really Jawbreaker, but like Sunny Day Real Estate. Like those more like 90s emo bands that. Again, it was kind of like before it was a bad thing. Like it was just a style of music, and it was okay, and that's what it sounds like here. And so
they notably changed their vocalists halfway through. like their career. Like I guess you could say when they made it big, that was when the vocalist change had happened.
Right. Yeah, and that typically happens too. Like when a band starts off smaller, like they did, you have a dedicated lineup, for the first couple of records, but then you're touring all the time and your life changes and people go, they leave. And that was, for some people, that unfortunately was the case with Hopesfall. But I guess we'll kick it all the way back to the beginning. Start off with the Frailty of Words. And we'll go from there. We'll take off into space.
Yeah, I found this record later. Most of what I heard started with Satellite Years. And I don't think I heard the No Wings to Speak Of EP until many years later. Like I'd never given it any listens, and I still didn't know at the time that the Frailty of Words existed. I think I may have found this long after Magnetic North.
Oh yeah.
But, this is one of those, okay, here's the first songs they ever wrote as a band.
Yep.
And one thing about Hopesfall that is worth mentioning at any point is they have a unique sound, they have a unique song style, and everybody ripped them off.
Yeah.
To the point where there are far more successful bands that exist that have probably made a lot more money and sold a lot more records with this guitar style. And you know it when you hear it, but you can't really put a finger on it other than, well, yeah, there's Hopesfall right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when we did a band, we did it too. We tried to sound like that, and I don't think we really reached that, but yeah, like that whole idea of let's be super melodic and be, but still equally as like intense,
Yeah, like this record's very, it's atmospheric in a way. Like there's a more full sound to it than just, hey, there's the guitar, there's the bass, there's the drum.
Right.
There's like a whole pattern over it. Like it's almost like they have like a fuzz distortion going on as well, which is kind of like it's just got that more spacey quality to it.
Yeah,
just kind of this feeling that you get when you listen to this album.
Yeah, I definitely hear that, and it was definitely expanded upon later on. On this record, I actually consider it to be kind of their most traditional record, as far as kind of still sounding like their style of music. Actually, one thing I really like about this record is the bass sound. You can actually hear the bass player, which is again not common. He's just got a kind of a nice clean tone, and like you'd think, clean bass, whatever. But like it actually sounds really good, and it like really backs it up, and you can hear the bass parts actually like being played individually, and it's not just a.
It's a very dry sounding record too. They clearly mic'd everything up the best they could, and Hopesfall, for being very trippy, especially when you think about what does Hopesfall sound like, it's that trippy space rock style. But 80% of their releases are very dry. In fact, I think the Satellite Years would be the only record that has any sort of atmosphere or, well, reverb is the most obvious sound.
Right.
But for the most part, your drums are dry, your bass is dry, and especially later on, your vocals. Like, there's no processing there.
Yeah,
it's
not at all.
Exactly what you get.
And the vocals really overpower the mics on this recording too. Like they're definitely in the red a lot,
Yeah, I would say though, I think some of the atmosphere came in on the EP, No Wings to Speak Of. I mean, we'll talk about that in a minute, but I think that's where the start of some of the atmosphere really like was in your face.
I think this one it was more about the riffs. Were more
because I mean, like. To me, like this one's my favorite record, and the opening track where it builds up and each instrument just kind of comes in is just, I love that. It's like the way you start like a show,
right? Sure.
You get the bass player playing, and then they shine the light on the guitarist, and the drummer kicks in. Like it's a fun start to something.
Yeah. Honestly, that's probably the best way to describe this record, is a fun start to something.
Standout track on this record for me is A New Day.
Oh yeah,
I mean, there's your Hopesfall. I call it the Hopesfall riff because it's for guitar players and bassists. It's the 8th fret, open fret, C to an E in drop D, which is what they're in. You're in a B flat to a D. I call it the Hopesfall riff because they go back to it so much. Every single record. And every band did that for like 12 years.
Yeah.
And it's a sound that you know and you like because it's a very pleasing chord change.
Yeah, even if you don't know about Hopesfall, you've heard other bands play this, and it's influential, and it's kind of weird too because with this record not really being that huge, it's kind of weird that it would all be there, like the whole package. I mean, on the first record, like for a band like Hopesfall, you really would think that the first record would be the worst, right?
Yeah.
But it's really not. I mean, it does sound notably different than the EP. And actually, what I like about this record that does not exist on future Hopesfall releases, there's kind of a chaotic sound to it too. It actually gets chaotic. I mean, and I don't mean like Converge or something chaotic, but they kind of create a wall of noise in places. With the vocals just being so overpowering in the mix. And there's actually some moments on that record that sound a little bit like the band Training for Utopia. If you remember their Plastic Soul Impalement CD. Pretty similar in places to that. And the vocals are a little similar to the early Training for Utopia as well. Which is
go ahead.
I say it's kind of a weird connection to make, but I remember thinking that like when I first heard it.
Yeah, I feel like the vocals, like just then, listening to it now and then remembering, my notes here that, they kind of have this like vague vacuum effect almost, like he's screaming inward to a degree.
Yeah.
Which, I've heard that style reproduced on a few other bands, but it's just very like, I guess it could be the effect created when he kind of ratchets up his scream from a lower register to a higher register. It just has this like this sucking sound feeling, almost like the air's going the other way.
So let me get this straight. It sounds like it sucks. Got it. Okay. glad we established that.
Yes.
No, I know exactly what you mean though. Like it almost does sound like it's an inhalation scream.
Yes.
I can't verify whether it is or isn't, as I've never seen Hopesfall with this vocalist. I'm gonna go ahead and say it's not. Just by the way it sounds, but I can understand how it does sound like that in places. But one thing I really liked about the vocals here was that they were just very emotional and very, very impactful. Like there was a ton of emotion in all of the vocals.
Yeah,
and you can really hear that.
And I think it makes me wonder, like if that. The emotion that they're trying to convey, maybe they felt that the music didn't quite match up to that, which is why I think when they moved on to No Wings to Speak Of 2 years later, that's when they started ratcheting up some of that melody going on, and they changed up, with adding a whole lot of atmosphere, to their music, because just in every aspect, No Wings to Speak Of, which is sadly only an EP. It sounds very different than the Frailty of Words.
It does, and not in a bad way either.
Yes, it's very, very good, but it's definitely different.
I think the hardest part is that I think the hardest part with this record is that with the EP versus Frailty of Words. I was actually a little disappointed in the EP the first time I heard it because I was stupid and, I was in a brutal mood that day instead of like, not, atmospheric mood, which it happens.
That's been me all week.
Yeah, that's you every day, buddy. But he's like, yeah, but why isn't it heavier? It's like, dude, it's a Merle Haggard record, It's like, but no, I remember, obviously I saw the error in my ways, but I think this EP was very transitional in the sense that, like, I think every hardcore band, you put your first record out, and it's like songs that you've had on the books for literally years, and you're basically presenting your version of hardcore or your version of metal to the world for the first time, and So Frailty of Words has a huge diverse mix of influences on it, which I think sometimes people mistake for progressive, which it isn't really progressive, but I think the band just made a decision on this EP, like, okay, so are we going to continue to be heavy, or are we going to pursue this melodic sound?
Because I feel like there was 4 songs on this album, and I listened to it like 5 times, but I did it while I was working.
Right.
So sometimes I came in and out while I was listening to it, but I think it feels like the first 2 songs are like they're like a melodic version of their, the amped up version of their old style, and then I think the last 2 songs are more of that like almost rockish type of a sound.
A little bit. I mean, the Far Pavilions opens up pretty intensely, but it quickly bogs down. It doesn't bog down, but it slows down into
it goes to a slower register.
Mm-hmm.
And it does that, like it starts very intense, and then you get to like what would be like the middle track of a CD, and then it just leaves you there. Which is why I'm sad about the EP. Like I wish there was more, because I really like the sound.
Right, and that
No Wings to Speak Of has.
Right, and that was the last recording that Doug, their original vocalist, was on. And
now, did he write the lyrics for the Satellite Years?
I don't know, because when I listened to the Satellite Years, see, Hopesfall kind of came around at a time where, yes, you could find information about them on Wikipedia, but there isn't as much information on them, like behind the scenes, as there is for other bands. Because like nowadays, when a band comes out, you know everything about them. You know who wrote the songs, you know who did everything. But essentially, it sounds to me like I can only go by how it sounds, and I can tell you that it sounds very much in the same vein as what we had gotten on No Wings to Speak Of. So I'm gonna go ahead and say that it was probably a mix of Doug and Jay that wrote those lyrics. I think Doug left and they kept the songs that they had, and then they just had Jay come in and do his thing, and he probably just finished the rest of it up, and again, this is just guessing, because it's possible that, like, it's not uncommon in a band where the guitarist writes all the lyrics, or
well, once we get to A-Types and Magnetic North, Jay Forrest kind of took over the songwriting.
He becomes the band, at that point.
The style change, the vocal delivery changes, but without getting too far ahead, it's the Satellite Years.
Well, yeah, so
we could do an entire podcast just on the Satellite Years.
Well, so the EP, just one last thing I'll say about that is that the EP really gives you a good taste of what's to come, at least on the next record, but still changes things up enough to kind of create an atmosphere of its own, and it's kind of got its own sound. And whenever I'm talking about this, I always kind of keep a frame of reference that helps me categorize the albums better. They're not concept albums by any means, but there's kind of a space theme that shows up in the Satellite Years that continues on through the end of Magnetic North, whereas the Frailty of Words and No Wings to Speak Of still kind of felt more like I don't know, atmosphere, like a earthy, like kind of more of an earthy sound, and didn't really focus on like the space thing. So like, if you hate the space aspects of Hopesfall, those first 2 records are still definitely worth a listen.
Yeah, definitely.
I would almost call them a niche band, in the sense that there's this entire genre of film and TV that's called space cowboy.
Yeah.
That you either love or you hate. And most people that love space cowboy, space westerns, that sort of thing, they tend to be a very angry group of people, because we can't get as much of it as we want. At this point, we've got Firefly and things that happened 20 years ago that are still kind of cool.
Right.
Hopesfall, same vein. They fill a niche in your brain where, like, this galactic type of sound, this solar overtone that other bands don't do. And one person would say, well, Massive Attack does that sort of thing. I say, no, that's not the same feeling, because Massive Attack will get you closer to Nine Inch Nails than anything else. And while that would be a very industrial way of thinking, Hopesfall is, you got to spend some time in the atmosphere to really enjoy what's going on.
I want to hear some chorus and flange pedals, man.
Hey,
exactly.
What was this, new metal now?
Yeah, the Satellite Years kind of is a little bit, but that doesn't bother me too much. So the Satellite kicks off with a song called Andromeda. It's an instrumental, and it kind of like puts you in the mood for the record. Kind of right off the bat. It doesn't spend a lot of time establishing its atmosphere, but you can basically tell this is something new. This doesn't sound like, the potential fifth track off of No Wings to Speak of, We're somewhere else entirely, and you're looking through the album notes, and there's all these pictures of satellites and bodies in space and all this stuff, and Andromeda kind of kicks on at kind of a slower speed, and I think that was kind of a common complaint when that record came out, was that they'd kind of slowed down, that the intensity had been taken down a notch, which is just a product of well, this is the atmosphere that we were going for. But again, if you're if that's not your jam, it's not your jam.
And those people clearly didn't hang on long enough for the bending.
Right. Well, yeah, the bending.
Yeah.
Deaded Magazines, Dana Walker, I listen to Andromeda and I really feel like I'm in a spaceship as it blasts off into space, and I'm watching the Earth getting smaller and smaller.
Right, but it's done so well. It's not cheesy, like you'd think, like if I was going to go out and make a space rock album like right now, I would probably like put all these like sound clips of like rockets taking off and stuff like in the middle of it and stuff. Hopesfall doesn't have to do that. They achieve that with Andromeda, and that was the big thing too. Is it's starting off with an instrumental. That's kind of ballsy for like this kind of band, because you really don't. You don't.
Yeah, usually you want to start off like hard and heavy right out the gate if that's what you're about, and so the fact that they started with that shows, that there was definitely a departure from their prior sound. Notably because this is the album where Jay Forrest comes in, replacing Doug Venable as the vocalist.
Right.
Which to my discretion, I think I preferred Venable.
Sure. A lot of people
to Jay
do.
Forrest.
Yeah. I like them both. I like them both because they serve very different purposes. Satellite Years was definitely the transition, kind of away from that sound, but still sounded similar enough. Like his screaming was very much in the same vein. It was kind of like when Dallas left Under Oath, and how Under Oath put out their Only Chasing Safety right afterward was Spencer, and he screamed like Dallas, on that first record that he was on. And I think it's kind of similar here on Satellite Years, is that you can tell that at this point in the band they're going out and playing live shows, and they're playing
they're still playing their old stuff, and
right, yeah. So they're still playing 3 songs off Frailty of Words, and 2 songs off of the EP, and then and then these new songs, and so they all blend together enough for like a live setting. And so Jay's vocals are definitely in the same vein. One thing that I will say about the record that doesn't make it quite perfect from a technical standpoint is the vocals are turned way down on this one.
They do get buried during some pieces, and like I sometimes can't understand, like I can't hear what's going on, enough to decipher the vocals without pulling up a lyric sheet.
Right. Well, and I can't help but feel like this was a deliberate choice too. I think maybe they'd been a little unhappy, and again, I don't know, but it just sounds like maybe like because the level of vocals on this record would be acceptable probably for other bands. Like if this was the first thing you heard by Hopesfall, it's not something that you would really notice that much. But you go back and listen to the EP, and like Doug is just like so loud in the mix. He's literally just above everything, like overpowers everything.
Yeah.
But I think this record, it was kind of more deliberate choice to kind of push the vocals back a little bit and let the music breathe.
Now, the Satellite Years was recorded by Matt Talbot in his own studio.
Yes.
Who is Matt Talbot? Because I know you know.
Matt Talbot.
He's the lead singer of, I can't remember the name of the band.
It's Hum, I believe. They have that song out called Stars.
So isn't this interesting that, because this mix kind of sounds like if you threw Hopesfall into a Hum record. You get your ambiance, you get your reverb, your drum sound, I swear, is just 2 overhead microphones with a kick mic. Like it's a very open sound. And I think part of it is just that's the ear you had behind the board, is how you get that sound, especially with that lower vocal. That's underground punk. Like,
sure.
No, I don't want my vocals to be the center point of the record.
Yeah, and I mean, it's possible that he may not have been that way. It may not have been a deliberate choice on the vocalist. I think it was really just the band was like, we have decided at this point that we are going to embrace the atmosphere 100%. And with that means that you're going to have to tone down the hardcore elements a little bit. But they didn't entirely on this record. So I think most people that liked Hopesfall were still on board for this record.
Yeah, I still pretty much like this record. It's not my favorite. I'm more of a fan of the first two, but it's still a good album. I can spin it.
It definitely used to be my favorite, and in a lot of ways, I'll still tell people it's my favorite hardcore album, even though it's hardly a hardcore album. It's got screaming, it's got heavy parts. You gotta look
really hard for the hardcore,
right? I mean, it's got screaming, it's got heavy parts, and it is very intense. And I think a lot of those songs, like just the melodies in there, can really get under your skin, and after repeated listens, it just really it's hard for me to shake those songs, when I'm done. And there's 2 songs of a very particular note on this record that really sum it all up, and they're at the very end. The first one is Escape Pod for Intangibles, which I believe actually Matt Talbot actually sings on that.
Yes, he does.
Because it's definitely not Jay singing. We will get enough of that in the future. But it sounds really good. It's very spacey, sparkly sounding. Super not metal. But
very Twinkle Twinkle Little Star.
Kind of, yeah, but kind of creepy too. It only has one lyric, one line, and it's just repeated over and over again. He says, "I left the horizon
curled up and
frozen still, the tilting of the hourglass with all this time to kill." And I don't know, it just really works. The song's not very long either. It's only like 2 minutes or whatever. And it functions as a very good build-up to the final track, The Bending, which is probably the hardest song on the record. It's typically a fan favorite at shows. When they play The Bending, they start playing and Jay jumps off the stage into the audience. It's a really intense song. Probably this song.
I'm glad they end the record with something like that, because I can't stand it when bands there's bands that like to end their records with like the slow drone out, and I much prefer like the let's go out with a bang.
Yeah, end it slow like we did. Yeah, I get that. But yeah, the bending is a perfect ending to the record. And it's weird because I think on this song Jay sounds the most like Doug that he does on the whole record. It's very similar to Doug's delivery without actually sounding exactly like Doug.
Yeah.
But this record kind of really propelled Hopesfall up there. They started kind of becoming a more popular band at this point, and they were signed to Trustkill Records. Who also had Poison the Well, and so they were definitely making a name for themselves with this record, which is why when we get to A-types, it all kind of changes.
I don't. No. Can we skip this one?
No, we can't. There's not enough albums to skip.
You can't skip an album that has Icarus on it. I'm sorry.
Icarus is probably the standout cut on the album, but it is different. So with A-types, what you get is it's kind of like let's say that the Satellite Years is a glass of water, and you take that glass of water and you pour it out all over the kitchen floor. Like, sure, it has similarities to that original glass of water, but it's clearly not the same thing. It is a lesser version of what you get.
Undrinkable because it is all over the floor.
It is literally all over the floor. So
is unlistenable.
So if you enjoy your giant glass of water, which is the past 3 albums, you're going to have a lot of trouble enjoying this because you're essentially laying on the floor, lapping it up with your tongue.
For those people that are trying to get a real grasp on what Dan is trying to convey, this is like when Rage Against the Machine stopped making music with Zachary De La Roche, and then we found out Chris Cornell was going to be the new lead singer of Rage Against the Machine. What did we all say? How is he going to do those songs?
Right.
And then 3 months later, the band is now called Audio Slave, and it sounds like what would happen if Rage started hanging out with Soundgarden.
Right.
Same thing. A-types is like what happens when Hopesfall gets a new lead singer, but they forgot to change the name.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. This album...
There's almost no screaming on this record. It's far less heavier than anything that they did.
Yeah, it's not crunchy. It's not, it's also not wholly atmospheric either, which is very strange to me. I could get past the fact that the majority of the vocals are sung, because I'm not that shallow as a metal fan, but this was just really different because, Jay pretty much screamed through most of the Satellite Years. I mean, there was some singing here and there, but it had always been that way with Hopesfall, so it wasn't that big a deal. But with A-types, I think they're trying to make a crack at kind of trying to go more mainstream. I think they were selling more records with Satellite Years, and they wanted to capitalize on that melodic sound, which they did. However, A-types was kind of more of a they were just trying to go straight rock, basically, at that point.
Yeah.
And I remember reading an interview I think it was with Josh Brigham, the guitarist, and he just said that Jay just showed up at band practice one day and was like, "Yeah, I think I'm just going to sing on all these songs instead of scream." And the band was just like, "Okay." That's how you know that Buddy is not in your band.
That's right.
Because he's gonna shove his bass down your throat, and then you're only gonna be able to scream. So
get it out.
I think the thing that I hate about this record the most is not even that. I don't like the singing. Because I don't like Jay's vocals. But the thing that gets me is the guitar tone, which it has this it's like it was lifted from a clip and pieced in there, like it's too clean sounding.
Sure.
The distortion is just very contained. The guitar feels very contained.
It's not a big sounding record, yeah.
Contained and squashed.
Which is kind of sad because a lot of the ideas that are on it are actually pretty good. Like Icarus being a good one. Actually, I actually do have a favorite song on this record because I don't hate A-types because at this point I'm still totally sold out on Hopesfall, and sometimes band justification, fan justification, plays a huge role sometimes in how we digest records. Because
I was already checked out at this point.
Well, Hopesfall for me, is very similar to Zayo in the sense that to me they can't do a bad record, so it's one of those deals where A-types is actually a pretty decent rock record. It's not great. It's not going to change your life, but it is a decent rock record with a lot of good ideas on it that I feel like maybe just kind of got rushed out and there wasn't a whole lot of thought put into it. And I do actually have a favorite song on this record. It's called Champion Beyond Blessings, which actually probably sounds the most Hopesfall-y on it, on the record. It's also one of the few songs that actually has screaming in it, although it's not the lead vocal. But the way it starts, I mean, it sounds almost like it could have been a B-side off of the Satellite Years. Just the way it starts off, very melodic, and it kind of builds up to a pretty intense midsection where the band kind of goes a little crazier and starts sounding like the old Hopesfall for about maybe 30 something seconds, which is a huge ripoff. Like if you're a fan, it's like, oh great, I got 30 seconds of the last record, great.
Hey, let's
take
do one
my
thing
money.
And never do it again.
Right.
One thing about Hopesfall that stands out to me is, especially on the early record and even the EP, a little bit less on Satellite. It gets a little worse on A-Types, and then we haven't gotten to Magnetic North yet. But the first and last record that they ever made have the most repetition, where the song really is just, let's loop this section 5 or 6 times. And they kind of get away from it on A-Types, but it's still there. And they kind of get away from it on No Wings to Speak Of. Satellite Years is kind of the most linear songs that they ever made.
Yeah.
So, did Hopesfall secretly, over the course of their career, create a discography that is actually a giant planet? Think about it. You have 2 hemispheres here. You have the albums at the end that have mainly singing. You have the album and the EP at the beginning that have mainly screaming. And then you have this middle record where it's a big mix, like an equator.
Yeah, maybe.
It's one giant planet.
It's a stretch, but yeah.
It's brilliant.
I think you've stayed up too late.
It's a stretch.
It is
It's past
late.
your bedtime, Joe.
But no, I get it though. I mean, I think that Satellite Years is a great center point to the band. And it's weird how my opinions have changed because I used to be just very like all Satellite Years. It's all I wanted. A-Types. Yeah, it was a record. It's a thing. It's a thing that exists. It's worth talking about at least for that.
But Magnetic North came out in 2007, and Dan is about to go full fanboy.
So Magnetic North. First of all, they get it off. They get everything off on the right foot with some spacey, kind of like an atmospheric spacey intro, which then kicks into Jay screaming, starts the record off screaming, so we're off to a good start. Screaming's not really...
Okay, sorry guys, I'm sorry for A-Types here. Here you go.
Yeah, kind of. He sings on this record, but his singing is vastly improved over what it was on A-Types, which makes sense because A-Types was probably the first time he'd ever tried that. And we all suck at some point in our lives, at something, and his singing just wasn't fantastic on A-Types. It was passable, It just seems like it's more emotional. The lyrics have more meaning in Magnetic North, and the music basically sounds like Satellite Years with more singing in it. I would say that it's kind of like what they were trying to do on A-Types, but like is still the same band that put out the Satellite Years.
Yeah. I actually listened to this one twice today. It's definitely, like I couldn't even get through. Like I've listened to A-Types before a long time ago, but I couldn't get through it this week. I just could not handle I needed something heavy.
Right.
Magnetic North at least was able to fill that, to a degree. But I agree, like the song structure and just the way that, all of it's conveyed. It feels like the vocals back up the emotion a lot.
Right.
That's conveyed in the song, and it feels like a well thought out record.
Yeah, I mean the vocals are a lot bigger on this record. They're more upfront. I mean they were upfront on A-Types too, but they just didn't sound good. But with Magnetic North, he's practiced a lot. He's sang in the shower, in the car, or whatever. In between recording those records. So he's much more dynamic like it's kind of one of those like, okay, I'm trying to learn how to sing, so I've gotten to the point where I can sing now, so it's not such a big deal that it has to just always be that. But it's smarter this time too, because one of the biggest criticisms for hardcore music and metalcore music in general is that people say, I understand the screaming, but I don't understand why it always has to be that. Why it has to just go on and just be screaming the whole time. So I think it's one of those, like, I mean, obviously Jay can scream. We all know that. Obviously he can sing, and this was the first time where it was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna throw everything I can do out there for how well it works on the song. And it's not trying to prove a point in what it is. And I think that's the biggest failure with A-Types was that it was like, oh, look, we sing now. Isn't that so cool? And like everybody thought it was cool. Like everybody in the band thought it was cool, but then like nobody that listened to the band thought it was cool. Like.
Yeah, because it sticks out like a sore thumb from the entire collection of records.
It's jolting for sure.
It's completely stylistically different. I mean, it seems like we keep going back to A-Types, but we're still upset about that record.
Well, I was pretty disappointed with it. Over the years, I grew to kind of like songs on it, but for the most part, when I want to listen to like the more rock version of Hopesfall, it's always Magnetic North.
Yeah.
It does everything that A-Types did better, with not just sounding like that. But what I like about this record is just that they kind of went back to the space theme a lot more. It sounds like more of a continuation of Satellite Years, but just but more in the rock direction. Which, if you listen to Satellite Years, you can tell they were going in that direction anyway. It was inevitable. And he sings a lot on Magnetic North, and people bashed it for that. A lot of people called him another A-Types, and I remember being initially disappointed because of how melodic the record was and how not heavy it is. Because like for the most part, we're all serious metal guys. We like everything to be and yeah. And so it may be closed-minded, but it's just how I feel. I can't help how I feel when I listen to something.
Yeah, I mean, I was just caught on a bad week with this one, really.
Yeah.
Like, I just felt like listening to Nile all week.
Right.
And I was listening to Hopesfall instead, so. Yeah.
I did bust out the Nile vinyl this week.
Completely different ends of the spectrum here.
Yeah.
But
with Hopesfall, this was kind of a swan song, too. I think the writing was kind of on the wall that this was going to be their last record. And so it sounds like that, too.
When this album came out, like, it came out in May 15th, and, it says here in September of 2007, they planned to change the name.
Right.
So they, like, wrote this, and then we're like, all right, this is the last thing we're doing. And,
right.
They plan on abandoning the entire ship.
Right. It's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Because they were very, very melodic on this record, but also heavy. One thing I appreciate, too, is that you get lots of atmosphere. But on the same token of that, you have a lot more buildup. So, like, kind of what I was hinting at when I was saying that, like, people that don't listen to hardcore always wonder, like, why is it always heavy all the time? But I think there's a lot more craftsmanship that goes into these songs because they do get heavy. Like most of them. They either start off heavy and kind of move in a different direction, or or they build up. Like the best way to put that is like the song "Bird Flu." Starts off slow and then just kind of builds and builds and builds and builds until we're before you know it, we're screaming and it's heavy and you've kind of got that build up, kind of like what we were talking about with Atom Ship when we were talking about Mothra and Aliens. How those songs start. They start in a certain place and then they end up somewhere completely different. And that's what I like about these songs is that they're crafted in such a way to kind of get you involved and kind of go on a journey with the band through each song. And that's what that's what Magnetic North sounds like to me, is a journey. And there's not a lot of records I could say like that because most records are just a collection of songs. Like that's what they are.
Yeah.
Like, we wrote these songs, we wrote 20 songs. We picked the best 12 out of those 20, This sounds like a finished product from beginning to end. And because like in Satellite Years, you're in space and it's kind of fresh and it's exciting, and you get to A-types and you're like, wow, this space thing really isn't working out for me. It's not what I expected.
It pretty much sucks, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's not what I expected it to be. It's something totally different that I'm not used to. So I'm going to take those experiences with me. And then you get to Magnetic North, and it's like, okay, I'm returning to Earth. I'm taking this huge journey from where I ended up back to where I began. But I'm embittered by it. There's a lot of bitterness on this record, and kind of just like a melancholy feel to it. And it's very emotional. It's very melodic. It's very intense at times. And I think it's just kind of like a journey. Like I almost want to think of like, they must have been teens when they did Satellite Years. And by the time you get to Magnetic North, you have kind of a more, I hate using this term because it's overused in music, but it's kind of a more mature
God, you said it.
approach to Hopesfall. It's kind of a more mature approach to the sound that they kind of started with, and in no way am I trying to say that hardcore is immature or that metal's immature just because it's heavy. I'm not making that stand or anything. But the songwriting is more mature and more experienced, because not very many bands with this many lineup changes are able to kind of be able to switch back and forth between their old and new sound like that. Typically it's an all or nothing.
Yeah.
And so I enjoyed that about Magnetic North, and it actually, within the past 2 years, it has actually replaced the Satellite Years as my favorite Hopesfall album.
Interesting. I never thought that was going to be dethroned.
Yeah. I just like it more. I know the songs better. I could sing all of them, kind of off the top of my head, and it's great. I mean, I like a lot of the different sound effects that are used in this. There's just a lot kind of. It's funny because I was praising Satellite Years for not using like spacey noises and stuff on their record, but on this one there actually are like spacey noises, but it doesn't come off as cheesy, and it definitely kind of feels like it was dedicated to the fans, as far as being like, okay, we did something that you guys didn't like, and we're sorry. There are aspects of that we do want to keep, but we also understand that you guys want to listen to space rock, so here it is.
And it's worth repeating, no other band really sounds like Hopesfall, but so many of them in the mid-2000s were ripping them off.
Yeah, many imitators, but nobody really sounded like them.
Yeah.
I just we're listening to The Devil's Concubine right now off of Magnetic North. This is another good example of a song that really builds up, because now we're at kind of the more chaotic part of it.
Yeah.
So
it's also sad because this was, like you said, this was the last album they made.
Right.
They didn't even make it a year into this record. They went to January 2008 and announced the breakup.
Yep.
But if you like all of this, apparently, I just saw this on the Wikipedia page that they reformed in 2016, and they are recording right now for a release in 2017.
Yep, they signed with the record label, and they are putting out a new record. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to hear what that sounds like. Is it going to be Magnetic North 2? Is it going to be Satellite Years 2? It's not going to be the Frailty of Words.
Yeah,
I can almost guarantee that. I don't think it's going to be A-types again. I don't think they're capable of putting out something like that again.
Well, they did a small reunion in 2011.
Yes, with Doug.
Yeah. Where they played mainly the Frailty of Words, No Wings to Speak of, and I think one or two songs.
Couple songs off Satellite Years, and Doug sang them.
Which definitely gives you the impression that he wrote those.
Right.
And we were all happy with that, but then we were all still sad that Hopesfall was gone. But I honestly had no idea, no indication, and I never believed that in 2017 we would have
a new Hopesfall album 10 years after we got the last one.
With Jay Forrest.
Yeah, Jay Forrest is back. I mean, it's kind of like, Hopesfall kind of has a Norma Jean kind of thing about them in that, like, everybody really likes the first vocalist. Like a lot, he is the band to them.
But Jay Forrest is more Hopesfall than
but let's
the
face
original
it.
singer.
Yeah, let's face it. Jay Forrest kind of is Hopesfall. As far as I'm concerned, he is. And I actually, even though, because it's one of those weird things where, like, if they said we're getting back together, we're going back to the Frailty of Words and No Wings to Speak of sound, and we're gonna have Doug. Part of me would still be sad that, like, Jay wasn't on it. Like, it just because that's just where I'm at. And it's the same with Norma Jean too. Everybody calls Corey the new guy, but he's not. he's been in the band longer than Josh was.
This is interesting for me. If this is true, Adam Morgan is also back playing drums.
Oh, really?
If this is true, which there's no way for me to verify it, but he is mentioned in the current lineup.
Yeah. Cool.
I'm happy.
Yeah, Morgan was the one on Satellite Years, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, isn't it? I think the new lineup is basically the Satellite Years lineup, as far as I know.
It's gonna be a good year next year, guys, when this record comes out.
Well, this year, man.
Oh, it is coming out this year?
2017. That's what year it is.
Okay. Let me put that on my calendar now.
Yeah. One thing that I'm very disappointed at is whenever they did reunite, I was not aware of it. Honestly, I've been back up on Facebook and stuff more since we started doing the podcast than I was kind of before. And the sad thing about it is, as soon as they reunited, they re-released. I think it was Magnetic North, A-Types, and Satellite Years on vinyl, which I would have really loved to have. I mean, I could get them on eBay, but they're like hundreds of dollars, and I already have the CDs, so there's no point in doing that.
Maybe you'll find them in a record shop one day when you're perusing and find it for $1.
Yeah, let's hope so. So that means I want the rest of that means that I want the next record to suck so that everybody hates them, and then I can pick their stuff up for cheap. That'll work.
I would say then that final thoughts on Hopesfall is let's all listen to space rock.
Right. Is this live, what we're listening to right now, Joe?
Nope, this is off the record.
Can you play that part again? The part that's on right now? It is my favorite moment on the record. It's just really nice.
We lost Dan.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just going into it,
Dan just pulled it.
You like the pseudo-talking thing going on?
I like the pseudo-talking thing, but I like this part right here.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I just like it's like a toy
very
telephone.
Metroid.
Yeah. Like it's very nice.
Did you just say Metroid?
No.
Oh.
But
must have been the space rock talking to me.
Yeah, I never made that connection, but yeah, actually Metroid would probably be a really good game to play while listening to Hopesfall. Because you're in space, you're isolated. Yeah. Works out really well.
We're in space.
Yeah. So yeah, Magnetic North, definitely my favorite record by Hopesfall, and I would not be disappointed at all if the next record was in that same vein.
Go to the store right now. Go on Amazon. Go on, Google Play Music. Whatever you use to buy your music today. Buy the Satellite Years. Buy Magnetic North. Listen to them both, and then fill in the gaps.
Yeah, you might have to YouTube to get Frailty of Words, but it is absolutely worth searching for if you can find it. Yeah, obviously, if you could find it on CD, that'd be great, but it'd probably be pretty difficult. But YouTube is your friend. You can also stream the Hopesfall reunion with Doug. You can stream that on YouTube as well, I believe. Last time I checked, the whole concert was still up there.
And on that note, April did indeed leave with silence.
Yes, it did. Next week we have a special guest lined up, and we are actually going to be talking about the band Death. And as we usually say in our podcasts, at some point, you can listen to our podcast on Google Play. You can listen to it on iTunes. I mean, you're listening to it now, so you probably already figured that out. But you can find anything you ever want to know about us at www.discussmetal.com. And we just personally want to thank you for listening to our podcast. This is why we do it. And if you've been completely off-put by the last few episodes, I promise you we are going to get brutal. We are going to get heavy again starting next week.
Yay!
There you go, buddy. Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
This has been episode 11 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at discussmetal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher. Visit discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. Once again, thank you for listening, and we will see you next week for episode 12, Death.